Delicious in Dungeon is a series where the main cast is pretty much, yeah, they're broke as shit, right? So they gotta cook everything that they kill to sustain themselves and achieve what they need to achieve in the dungeon, right? I'm gonna stop yapping now and we can just start talking about, you know, the events that unfold in Delicious in Dungeon. All right, so the first scene starts off with the group being a little bit fatigued from the lack of nourishment they've been receiving while, you know, traversing through this dungeon. And well, you see, that's a little bit of an issue because they're fighting a goddamn dragon right now. And our main character, Laos, he's thinking about this current situation, like thinking about how sluggish they're moving and whatnot. And so he's, you know, trapped in thought. And so his sister Fallen comes in clutch and pushes him out the way, but she kind of gets, you know, snatched up in the process. So as she's getting snatched up, she teleports like all her group to the surface of the dungeon, right? So next we see they're out in this field and Laos ends up with his friends Chiluk and Marcel, right? And Laos immediately realizes, yeah, my sister, she's not up here with us. And so immediately his first thought is to get in action and go try and save his sister, right? But remember, these guys are fatigued from the lack of food they've been getting, so there is no way for them to like physically make it down to the 6th floor. Regardless, Laos is like, yeah man, fuck all that shit, right? So he just talks to his, you know, his teammates and he's like, yeah, just give me your stuff, I'll sell it real quick and then I'll go save her on my own. And the other two are like, yeah, no, I'm gonna keep my stuff actually. And she's kind of our friend too, so yeah, I'm gonna go down there and join you in your little rescue mission. And you know, Laos is, he's cool with that, but he reminds them yet again, like guys, we don't got any money, so what the fuck are we gonna eat down there? Yeah, this is where I should sidebar and give you guys a little bit of information on our boy Laos, really, because he has this unique infatuation with these monsters, right? Yeah, what I mean by that is he seriously wants to eat these monsters out. Laos is trying to convince the group to partake in his dungeon cuisine because, well, they can't afford regular food. So, yeah, just resort to eating what you kill, you know? Yeah, it makes sense. At the first thought of this idea, eating all these fucking disgusting looking ass monsters, Marcel and Laos get to arguing with one another. And like in the midst of them arguing, they would come across this cute little mushroom running for its life. And well, yeah, you see what happened. But anywho, after sourcing their first ingredient, Laos immediately gets to searching for more stuff to, you know, incorporate with this new meal. I don't even know if we can call this shit ingredients for real, but regardless, he gets right to it after he gets everything. And I mean like literally, he gets right to it. He just starts throwing shit in the fucking pot. There's no real finesse, no real love for this cooking game, right? And you know, because of this lack of passion, the shit he ends up cooking turns out to be, well, shit, right? And well, it turns out they were being stalked while they were cooking. You know, the whole time they're just like meandering in this dungeon by this little dwarf nigga, right? And he couldn't just stay in the shadows after he saw this trash they whipped up, right? So he comes up and shows these niggas how it is done for real, for real. And that's our introduction to our boy Senshi. You know, you ain't supposed to know his name yet, but that's his name. As he's whipping it up and whatever, Marcel comes up to him and she's like, nigga, I literally just saw you take this shit off the fucking wall and you expect me to fucking eat it, right? And as she's, you know, going on complaining about like, oh, I'm a little pussy eater, I'm not an adventurous eater, right? She literally gets taken out by his slime. And it turns out she has history with slimes in this dungeon because, well, apparently her first death was to a slime. And this is when the concept of like being resurrected is introduced. So I guess like them going after Laos' sister Fallen is not, you know, it's not futile. There's a chance to revive her despite her, you know, getting. He just gets to immediately preparing this new ingredient, you know, the slime that just, you know, fell from the sky without even asking if she's all right. But, you know, I kind of gotta respect the commitment to the game. He doesn't give a fuck if his homie got smoked right in front of his face. He's gonna cook it up. I mean, that's literally what it is. That's how he moves. And commitment to the game is something he has because apparently he's been like chilling in these dungeons for 10 years or so. He has like a love for cooking monsters. Whereas Laos, he just has a love for monsters and also putting them in his mouth. But eventually they end up making this hot pot meal, right? And understandably, Marcel is a little hesitant to want to try it because, I mean, she almost got killed by the meal that they're about to eat, but that's tough. But eventually she's persuaded to actually try it, and they're all pleasantly surprised by how well it turned out. And so they eventually get to talking over their meal and whatnot, and they tell Shinji why they're down there, why they're trying to traverse down the dungeon, you know, to find the red dragon and hopefully save Fallen, right? Even with the idea of Fallen getting, you know, eaten and digested, there's still a chance for them to save her, because guess what, guys? Red dragons apparently digest shit slow. So, hey, because of Shinji's love for the game, right? He hears about the red dragon that they're going after, so he asks him to, you know, tag along to the group. And so of course they agree to end up letting them tag along, and they end up, you know, going down the floor in the dungeon, and they end up in this little like forest area. I don't know why I shrugged my shoulders like I don't know, nigga. I know. I watched the fucking anime. So they end up in this like little forest area. And Marcel ends up getting a little bit fatigued from, you know, all the walking that they've been doing. And Shinji's like, you know what, we'll post up and find something to eat. You know, considering the fact that she almost died and whatever. Marcel's not really in the mood to eat monsters again, so they go about, you know, harvesting some of the dungeon plants that are there. And as they're doing this is when you start to realize Marcel kind of fucking sucks at this dungeoning thing, because she ends up getting, you know, trapped up in all these like vines or whatever, and almost dies yet again. And so they end up saving her, of course. They're not gonna let her get taken out by some nameless fucking vine creature thing, mabob. Shinji, he looked up this like little custard tart looking kind of thing, right? And it turns out to be very, you know, a sweet little treat for the group. A sweet little, I don't know why the fuck I said it like that. A sweet little treat for the group. The group ends up going to bed, and the next morning, Marcel wakes up smelling like, you know, whatever the fuck the group next to them is cooking, right? And she's, you know, kind of attracted to the scent. And Shinji, like, guys, if I fuck up the pronunciation of his name multiple times throughout this video, just know I'm trying. But regardless, Shinji, he recognizes this as Marcel's body, you know, just beating the craving for fat, right? Meanwhile, she's like, nigga, I just don't want to eat fucking monsters. But regardless, fuck that idea. Yeah, they go looking for some monster eggs. And well, since she knows where to look because of his 10 years of experience inside the dungeon. And so they come across this nest of this like, well, this snake chicken thing. Look at it, it's a snake chicken thing. I'm not making this shit up. And well, they get right to taking its eggs. While the group that they saw earlier, they got right to getting fucked up by this snake chicken thing, right? Marcel was in the middle of boom ganging one of the snake eggs or whatever the fuck, snake chicken eggs, basilisk eggs, right? Because she was in the process of taking one. It turned around and saw her, you know, taking her fucking child. It's going after Marcel now. And you know, as she's running for her fucking life, like I said, she sucks at this dungeon thing. Laos is just sitting in the corner, roasting her ass on how ineffectively she's running away, but eventually he steps in and saves her, well, by doing this.
手足を広げて体を少しでも大きく見せ、大きな音を出して威嚇する。これだけで真っ先に距離を詰められることがなくなる。
And Shinji, he sees this as a chance to team up with Laos and take this thing out pretty badassedly, I might say so myself. But remember the dude that got messed up earlier by that snake chicken thing? Well, it turns out he got poisoned because snakes, well, they kind of do that shit sometimes. And luckily though, Shinji has an antidote on standby, but instead of using it on this nigga, I'm not gonna waste this fucking ingredient on someone's life. I'm just gonna cook with it instead. Meanwhile, as we got this dude, you know, dying with poison, you know, being pumped through his body, just through all his fucking veins. Shinji, he's just making a fire meal right in front of him, right in front of this dying man. But eventually the dying dude gets to try it. And you know, despite the fact that he's dying right now, he's like, this shit is, it's kind of gas, bro. So they end up saving him, racking up some good karma, hopefully. But regardless, after that, you know, quick little life or death situation, they're discussing ideas on how they can, you know, source some more ingredients so they can continue going down the dungeon, right? And Marcel is, you know, coming up with all these ideas, trying to help out the group, but they're kind of disregarding her because, well, she's been fucking up. I'm not gonna lie, she's been fucking up. And so eventually the idea of harvesting these little like mandrake thingies, that comes up, right? And she hops on that idea because apparently from her time in magic school, she learned a technique behind harvesting said mandrakes. And you know, as their discussion of precautions behind harvesting these mandrakes without dying, because apparently once you pick them up, they release like this blood-curdling scream that will kill you on sight. The method that Marcille had in mind, you know, the method she learned, it was just to tie a rope around the mandrake and then, you know, tie a rope around an innocent little dog, and then let the dog run off, and then when that dog runs off, it pulls the mandrake out, and at the same time, it kind of murders the dog, right? And so since he's just like, F all that, I'm gonna just do it the way I've been doing it for years. And just, you know, cut him by the head, kill him, and then I take him out. Marcille's idea is being disregarded yet again. It has her feeling, you know, a little bit hurt, right? It hurt her ego, because she, you know, she wants to be useful to the group. So she comes up with this plan to wrap a rope around a monster's neck instead of a dog, so she'll kill a monster, f the monster. And she does this by setting up like a little contraption next to like this monster bat nest, right? And she sets it off, and it works. It does work. Her plan works almost, well, a little too well, because this bat that came flying out, it came out, and you know, in its process of dying, it's like, fuck that shit. I'm not gonna be the only one to go, right? So it brings that mandrake right over to her too, and in the process, she hears a part of this scream or whatever, and makes her go a little bit brain dead. And you know, as she's brain dead, this gives her a chance to, you know, be honest with her friends Chilek and Laos and tell her like, I was just trying to help out, right? They're having this little like heart-to-heart conversation while she's like half retarded. I don't know if I could say that for real, but you know what I mean. You know, it's getting real like sentimental. And as they're having this like conversation, Shinji, he's just in the background cooking it up, unbothered. He doesn't give a f about what they're talking about. And yeah, but they eventually begin moving further down the dungeon, and it turns out this nigga Chilek is pretty useful when it comes to like finding traps and whatnot. He's just finding all these things and finding all these shortcuts to allow them to, well, take shortcuts. And eventually they come across this room that's explicitly with the purpose of being a trap room, right? I don't know why I didn't just say trap room right there, but regardless, they come across this, and Chilek, he's like, yeah, let's traverse this little area slowly and cautiously, which makes sense, right? But Shinji could not give less of a fuck, to be honest. So he just goes through and just setting off all these different traps, eventually to the point where he hits like this little fire trap thing, and he gets the idea to, well, cook with it, right? But eventually Chilek gets fed up and pissed off with all this carelessness being displayed by Shinji, and he goes on this rant about like, stick to your roles, whatever the fuck, old man. You do this, you cook or whatever. When it comes to traps, this is my shit. You listen to me, boy. And they get into an argument or whatever. Eventually, they calm down. I'm not gonna go over the argument in, you know, an effort to save time, but they calm down and come to an agreement that Shinji will listen to him in regards to traps as long as, well, Chilek helps him cook something. And so eventually they get to prepping inside this literal trap room, right? A little dangerous to me. It would not pass any OSHA standard, but regardless, these niggas are on their fucking grind. Well, the plan now is to start preparing that bat that Marcille killed, right? And so Chilek starts helping doing the prep work by using this big ass guillotine in the room to chop up the giant bat into, well, eatable pieces. And they also start preparing their food by adjusting the fire trap to get like the right heat to where they can actually, you know, like fry some of the food they're making. And Shinji, he actually lets Chilek take over this process, allowing him to like, you know, learn a thing or two, allowing him to, you know, my stutter's crazy, but allowing him to, you know, kind of build a bond. But regardless, they end up making this food right here. And that's the end of the episode pretty much. And now we're on to the next, right? And a little side note, a detail I wanted to point out, in the like intro screen, on like the little frame that they have of Shinji, right? They have these adventurers harvesting a mandrake using Marcille's traditional method. But regardless, this episode actually starts off with the group, you know, heading a little bit further down the dungeon. And, you know, trying to like find a little secret passage or whatever. Chilek fucks around and messes up Laos's like sword hilt. That was like a memento from him and his sister. But Laos is not the type of dude to be pressed about, you know, little issues like that. They got bigger concerns right now. He's currently worried about this very edible looking armor in his eyes that he read about in a book. And the group is like, nigga, what the fuck are you talking about edible armor? But regardless, the group comes up with a plan to just say, screw it, we're gonna run past these niggas, and yeah, that's gonna be the plan, right? We're just straight up running away. So they get to doing that, but this is an anime we're watching here, guys. Let's be real. So nothing's gonna go according to plan, actually. So they end up getting stopped by the group of armor. They're discussing on how to like actually deal with this, and so they eventually come up with this plan to have 3 of the group distract them. Meanwhile, Laos will sneak around and get to whatever the fuck they're guarding. And he actually does this successfully and comes across this set of elegant looking armor. So he gets to fighting with this thing and eventually hears like his group struggling outside and realizes like he's not getting any help in this situation. So he has to lock in and do it himself, right? So he bosses up, steps to the set of armor, and as he's doing this, he broke his sword. He broke his sword into fucking pieces. So yeah, now he's just kind of fucked. So he does the only thing he really can do and starts just throwing shit at this motherfucker, right? And you know, as he's throwing stuff at it, he notices something odd about this set of armor. He notices that with the shield it had, it tried to protect the shield and not protect itself with the shield. And that's when he noticed upon further inspection that there was like a little egg thing on this shield, right? And you know, not realizing that this could be like a weak spot or anything, man, fuck that. He realized something very important about this thing he was dealing with, and that's the fact that he can eat it. So eventually he gets the better of this set of armor, and he realizes that what they're dealing with is like a set of, well, not really a set, a colony of mollusks that's like actually controlling the armor like a set of muscles. So regardless, he takes the shield and chucks it out towards the group, and then all these sets of armor, they go towards that shield to try to protect the sack of eggs. So, you know, now with that situation handled, they start discussing more important things like the technicalities behind actually cooking this, right? So they eventually start preparing it like it's some kind of oyster, like it's, you know, an oyster. They end up making these like little charred grilled oysters and like a stir fry thing. And they said it was all right. I can't really say for certain because I wasn't there, but anyways, with this situation of Laos getting his sword broken and whatnot, and them being kind of broke, so they're not gonna go out and buy a new sword, Laos just takes, you know, one of the swords off of the armor. And well, it turns out it's a special little sword too. It's a little frame.
それもらっていけば。
ライオス、その剣使うなら呪われてないか鑑定しとこうか。
大丈夫大丈夫。
It's the start of this episode, and they're in a new setting yet again, right? And as they're traversing through the area, this nigga's Laos, he's just sound whoring like it's Siege or something, right? He's calling out like everything he hears. And eventually, as he's calling everything out, he hears the sounds of earth golems. And this piques the interest of Shinchi, because what golem keeping is a hobby of his. So they go to one of Shinchi's like little hideouts that he has like stashed throughout the dungeon. And I guess golem keeping is one way you can describe what he does, because when it's time for him to make his rounds, he gets, well, I'm gonna show you, he just gets to straight assassinating these niggas. They were just taking a nap before they showed up, right? And now they're dead. Now they're fucking dead. But regardless, after all that, they get right to harvesting the fruits of their foes. Well, the vegetables in this case. And you know, the group is taking a little break as Shinchi's just, you know, taking care of his little hideout or whatever. And they eventually start to talking about like the restrooms of the dungeon and how well kept they are in this little area. And they start putting pieces together and realize like, who's taking care of shit down here, right? And it turns out Shinchi is the one literally taking care of the shit, you know, taking the poop and using it as fertilizer, right? And so the group is like, what are you doing, bro? And through this, they have a conversation to where they realize that Shinchi is someone that really does care about like maintaining the balance in the ecosystem of the dungeon environment, you know? But the group doesn't want all the food goods they gather to go to waste, so they eventually come across this little bar, tavern area inside the dungeon and try to barter with the barkeep there, right? And he's like, get the fuck out of here, nigga. Get the fuck up out of here. He immediately shoos them away because they're fucking broke. Bartender said, we only deal with fucking green here, nigga. I ain't talking about your fucking lettuce. In the middle of this argument, you know, kind of a little bit of a surprise, everyone in there just gets fucking massacred. No exaggeration, except for like the main group. And it's because Shinchi, it turns out he knows this group of orcs that came in and murdered him. And it turns out that the orcs are being forced further up the dungeon by the Red Dragon and all the terror it's causing on their floor that they used to reside in. And because of this like homeless situation that the orcs are in, they're like, hey, Shinchi, I know we're cool and all, but I'm gonna need your food, nigga. And because since she noticed one of the orcs that was, well, robbing him blind, he was taking something that he noticed he could cook with. And because of that, since she's like, hey, just take us hostage for the night, right? And we'll make bread for you guys. And the group's like, what the fuck, nigga? You must got something planned, right? And he's like, yeah, no, I just wanted to make bread. That's it. That was his plan, to make some fucking bread. But regardless, what this allows for is a little bit of world building, because apparently these elves and orcs, they have like some sort of historical beef with one another, right? And it started with like elves forcing them out of their homeland, and then they retaliated, and then elves retaliated back, and then it starts like, you know, an endless cycle of hatred that's apparently present in this world. So elves and orcs just intrinsically, they do not like each other. Like, these niggas are racist to one another. Like, if there was a hard R for this universe, we would see Marcel dropping it on these orcs. We would. Because of this like hatred for one another, this like intrinsic disagreement with these two groups. The orc dude, he doesn't want any of our main group, you know, Laos and the others, to have any of the bread that they just made. And like the orc dude's son, he notices this shit and he's like, bro, it's kind of whack. It's kind of whack. They just made it and you're not gonna let them eat them. Because his son said something about the situation, it causes him to fold a little bit and lets them make a full meal. There's a lot of cooking in this show, don't forget that. And like through this meal that they're enjoying with one another, they actually get to talking about their motivations, and Laos explains that he's looking for the dragon that forced the orcs out of their homeland, right? And he insists with the dragon to like let him know like where the fuck it is, like give us the shortcut. The orc, he's a little hesitant because he's just blown up his location, he's just blown up his spot, right? And he doesn't really want to do this to random people, but through like under talking to Laos and like witnessing his conviction to the cause of saving his sister, he's like, you know what, I'll trust you. He gives him a shortcut now to get to the dragon a little bit quicker, hopefully in time to save his sister. All right, so we're at the start of the next episode, and that is episode 5. And the group we're introduced to, they're already doing a lot better than our previous group because, well, these niggas actually got food. And they're not just sitting around eating literal monster cock. But you know, as they're eating, chilling, meandering and whatnot, they get approached by this dude, like a random guy. And he's like, why y'all guys taking it easy? Why you niggas chilling for real, bro? Shit is serious out here, nigga. But regardless, the group that, you know, Kabaru's group, the group that we have been introduced to, they pretty much brush whatever the other group was saying, like, on some, we'll show them, you know, like that type of energy. But yeah, after that, why am I so dark? Give me a sec. But yeah, after that, the group comes across like a group of zombies that have a whole bunch of treasure and shit on them, right? So after seeing all this, they're like, let's head back to the surface and consolidate our loot, our newfound treasure. But not even a second later, these niggas end up dead, fucking deceased. So yeah, our group comes across this scene of dead adventurers, right? And you know, they're nice people, so they start to like organize their bodies and of course take all their food stuff and whatnot, but regardless, organize all their bodies in a line, so whenever like a resurrector or a reviver or whoever comes through, they're able to like revive them nice and simple. You know, as they're inspecting their bodies, they come across the treasure, right, that the previous group had just seen. And the thing about this treasure is when Laos starts inspecting it, his sword starts, you know, like tweaking out, right, at the treasure. And this is when the treasure like literally comes alive and it's flying around and shit. And you know, Marcel, she handles that, you know, light work. I don't know if you were like following the premise of this show or whatever, but of course these niggas are gonna eat these fucking bugs, all right? So since she gets right to preparing these things, no conversation needed for real. He's sorting out the edible ones from the non-edible ones. You know, with this scene, we get a little bit more of Dungeon Meshi lore. I don't know if that's the right name, but I digress, all right? I digress. But what I'm trying to say, pretty much, you know, these little treasure bugs is one of the common foods that people eat outside of the dungeon in the above ground world, the regular world, right? Because it's like a little, you know, like, you know, if I could eat, you know, I'm assuming they're like, nigga, why am I'm trying to find a comparison, a real world comparison. That's why my brain just like died, but you can't compare treasure bugs to anything else in real life, I guess. But regardless, with that, we also learn that like the deeper in the dungeon that they go, the more pronounced the flavors of the monsters that they're eating are. I don't know why I wanted to include that, but I did. Now it's included. But yeah, regardless, the group ends up making some snacks out of these like treasure bug things. So as the group is heading further down the dungeon, they encounter some ghosts, right? And now previously with their old group, this was never really an issue because they had Fallon and she was really good at, handling ghosts. But guess what? That bitch ain't here right now. So they gotta figure this shit out themselves, right? So they decide to fucking run. So as they're running for their lives, Laos and his fat ass drop some of his food, right? So he goes around to pick it up, and as he's picking up his food, he fucks around and almost gets possessed by a ghost demon. They're not demons, I don't know why I added that, but a ghost. So as he's like mid getting possessed and whatnot, since she realizes we really gotta do something, right? Running just ain't gonna cut it. In a desperate attempt to, do something, he starts like injecting all these different like holy waters from all these different cultures from around the world. Like one of these bitches gotta work. So now he has like a hodgepodge of holy water and just starts swinging that bitch around. And due to the power of anime and faith, it works. And Laos seeing Sinchi like, really try, right? He thinks to himself like, we don't have Fallon right now. It may suck, but like moving forward, we gotta be able to handle these situations without Fallon, who I'm assuming was very like useful to the group, which she was. I don't know why I answered my own assumption like that, but keep you on your toes. So seeing this, he's inspired to help Sinchi out with the disposition of the ghost, right? So he grabs that holy water flail thing, right? And starts swinging it around as well. But as he's swinging it around, he starts making an ice cream because some of the things he put in there were like salt, sugar, milk, I think, to like make some holy water. And through that he made homemade ice cream. And I'm sure, I am positive you guys know by now, they eat it. They get right to eating it after all the ghosts are handled. And as they're enjoying their ice cream and whatnot, Laos says to the group, man, if my sister were here, we would not be having this much fucking fun.
Really, nigga?
After that little situation, the group continues their travels and they end up in this room with like these suspect ass paintings, right? And the fast metabolism gang is getting hungry again due to just eating like snacks and ice cream, right? So after getting like literally black holes sucked up into one of these paintings, right? Laos gets the idea to intentionally get black holes sucked up by one of these paintings that has food in it, right? So he can go in there and satiate himself. And at this point, when I was watching this for the first time, I'm like, this nigga's actually insane. He is insane, right? He's risking life and limb going into a dimensional rift, right? Just to grub down a little, right? Like this, Laos, he's a crazy nigga. I'm gonna like kind of rapid fire these scenes that happen. But the first one he jumps into this painting where like the birth of a prince is happening, right? And so as he's seeing this shit happen, there's some food there, but he's like, the vibes are a little bit too awkward for me to actually enjoy the food. So he asks the group to pull him out of there, and they do. But then after looking around at the other paintings, he sees one that's like depicting a party, right? And then he jumps right into there, and first things first, he gets right to getting assaulted. But anyways, he eventually gets past that situation and sees the baby that he saw in the last scene grown up as a little grown up, right? Vibes are a lot more vibey. He's calming down to the point where he's about to take a bite. And as he does this, the king just fucking dies. And now it's pandemonium everywhere. And then he sees like this little brown elf running up towards the king, right? So for this last scene, Laos is at this crowning ceremony, right? And he actually gets to chow down this time around, and he's enjoying all the food he's putting down. But this time around, the elf nigga recognizes him again, and he recognizes him as an outsider. I mean, rightfully so, he is. Like, who the fuck are you? And so the elf dude is about to turn and Laos into some ashes and whatnot, like barbecue the motherfucker for real. But luckily, just in time, the group pulls him out. And worst of all, none of the food Laos ate was stored in his stomach, so he's still hungry. But yeah, remember this elf nigga. I feel like he's kind of important to the plot. So anyways, after briefly talking about what just happened with the paintings and whatnot, the group moves on and they're coming to a rest. This is when Chillick notices that there's a mimic inside the room adjacent to where they want to rest, right? He thinks to himself, I'm not gonna say anything about this because I don't want Laos and since she's fiend ass is trying to cook this shit up. Because, well, Chillick has some kind of prior beef with him. Anyways, in the middle of the night, Chillick gets up to go get some water because he's, well, thirsty and shit. And he ends up getting trapped in the same room with the mimic. And so now with his life very much at stake, he remembers a fun little fact Laos would tell him. And it's the fact that if you flip, a mimic to its underside, you can see all this gonads or whatever. It's sex organs. I don't know why I had to specify that. So eventually through some struggle, he's able to flip the mimic around to expose its gonads. And Marcel hears all this shit happening. Pretty much, just eventually, the episode ends with them boiling the fuck out of this little mimic crab thing. And I don't even gotta say what they did to it, But the next episode starts off with that other adventure group, Kabaru and his people. It starts off with them being revived by a group of randoms or whatever. But like the dog nigga of the group, he sniffs out like the makes and the builds of Laos and his group. And so, a little subplot develops of Kabaru and his people pursuing Laos and his to try to get their shit back, But we're back with the OG Hungry Hippos, Laos and the other fat asses. And they finally make it to the 4th floor, which is covered in water. And, they're discussing like how they usually go about, traversing this little area and whatnot. And like the original members of the group are like, yeah, we just would usually use magic to walk across the water, right? And Senshi is not fucking with this idea at all, right? Because he views magic and people who use magic as motherfuckers who take the easy way out. But the others are like, we don't got time for that bullshit, right? A little bit against his will, they hold him down and then forcefully cast a water protection spell on him and then proceed to hurl him into the water. But that shit doesn't even work because all the shit, dirt and grime and blood inside Senshi's beard is acting as an insulator against the magic. So he just kind of sinks. And then Senshi's like, I told y'all niggas, fuck all that magic shit. So he calls on this thing that he's been using previously to traverse the water. And it's this little seahorse looking thing. Not like the seahorse you and I know. A literal fucking seahorse thing that they call a kelpie. And Laos sees this and he's like, I know you and your kelpie friend are cool and all, but we should kill it and use its guts to float the river. Senshi, kind of used to Laos and his crazy nigga behavior. He's like, nigga, shut the fuck up. I'm not gonna kill my girl who I've known longer than you just to cross the river, right? So he hops on, starts riding that thing, and starts to cross the river. But when he gets on, the kelpie thing isn't really too happy with Senshi's method of payment. So she opts to take Senshi's payment instead in the form of eating him for fucking dinner. But Laos and the group end up saving him by murking this piece of shit in its own territory. I'm sorry, this is the sorriest monster we came up to date, right? How are you gonna abduct a nigga, take him to your own home turf, right? Where he's not useful in at all and still lose the fucking fight. I'm sorry, but and you're weak as hell. Sorry as hell, I should say. But since she's kind of hurt by the betrayal, regardless, he thinks to himself, I got more food to eat. So he starts harvesting his old friend, now enemy. And Marcel, she uses the fat from the kelpie to make something up, right? She starts concocting something. And so as these two are busy, Chillick and Laos are going out exploring, just looking around the area. And then this is when they come across Kabaru and his group that they found dead earlier. Dead yet again. But this time around, they have some grains or whatever around them. So they take those before, putting their bodies in a safe spot. But anyways, Marcel was making some soap in order for Senshi to, clean the dirt and grime from his beard so he can actually walk across the water. She does this and it actually does work. It helps him be a little more buoyant, right? And so they get to cross in the water across the lake. But keep in mind, guys, this is an anime. Shit is not ever gonna be that simple as just getting from point A to point B, right? Because the whole time they were there, apparently, there was just a kraken chilling underneath the water beneath them. So, of course, they get right to fighting this thing. And now, since you're now accustomed to the idea of using magic, he gets the idea while they're fighting this thing for Marcel to use that magic spell on the kraken, right? So that whenever she uses it, it forces it to, repel the water and then force it to surface itself. It is successful to the point where since she's now able to dispatch this motherfucker with a clean jab right between them, right here. And you know what these niggas are gonna try to do with what they kill. They try to eat this thing, but apparently the kraken doesn't taste too good, right? So they opt to eat one of its parasites instead. And you know, as they're preparing the parasite, right? Laos just could not contain himself and ends up eating one a little bit prematurely, like it's some sashimi or some shit, right? And he ends up getting, unsurprisingly, his own parasite from that. But we're at episode 8 now, and it's pretty much starts out, well, not pretty much, it does start out with a backstory of Marcel and the time she's been in school, right? Now, apparently, she was a prodigy at the Mage Academy she went to, and this is where she met Fallon for the first time and, you know, kind of built a bond with her. I'm gonna kind of breeze through his backstory, but pretty much they were doing an experiment in their class, and more or less, Marcel notices that Fallon's looks like absolute dog shit. But some time passes and it's actually time to, you know, test the experiment, and it turns out that Fallon's was the best in the class, hands down. So this piques Marcel's, you know, curiosity a little bit, and then she ends up following her around for a little bit to see like what she does with her time, where she spends it mostly because it's not inside class, right? And then this is when we find out that Fallon ain't no rookie when it comes to this dungeon shit, because where she got like the materials for her experiment came from like this area she's been hanging out in, and it's pretty much like the outskirts of an actual dungeon, right? Pretty much through like their interactions and whatnot, Marcel, seeing Fallon's perspective, forces her to like change her own, right? And consider dungeons in a whole new light. But after that little bit of character development, the group reconsolidates their plans and, you know, go after the dragon that currently has, well, eaten Fallon. But Marcel wants to, you know, wash yourself down with some water before moving forward. I don't know. Wash yourself down with some water. What the fuck else would it be, Hayden? But regardless, as she's doing that, she's getting pissed about the fact that she's the only girl in the group, and she's also getting pissed about the idea that Namari, the previous girl in the group, left when shit went south, you know, when they last encountered that dragon. But as she's doing that, she's pouring out the water that she was using to wash herself down with, and she kind of fucks around and angers this like water spirit thing that immediately shoots her twice off the bat. But this is like the first time that I really like noticed that the anime does a really good job at like swapping the tone of things, because shit started to get a little, you know, well, feel a little desperate here when I was watching it for the first time, because what Marcel had to do in this like very much life or death situation, she had to like follow her own blood moving through the water to track like the Undi's movements in order to like fire spells in that direction just to buy herself some time, right? So she's doing that, fighting for her fucking life, but eventually the group is able to get her out of the water. And when they do this, they notice that the Undi thing, it's getting bigger, and it's getting bigger fast, right? So they decide, yeah, fuck that, we're gonna run up out of here. So they get to fucking bucking it out of there. So, you know, with Marcel almost dead and shit, the group decides to take a little break right here and make a barbecue for her to, you know, hopefully get the iron in her body back up so she can recover a little faster. But as they're cooking, there's a group further up the stairs that smells, you know, what they're cooking. And a member of this group is named Namari, and that's the girl who Marcel was just pissed off thinking about, you know, a few moments ago. So now with the groups meeting up with one another, Laos asks the gnome nigga of the group, who's also like a mage, healer, clerk type shit, right? If he can heal Marcel. And the gnome dude, he's like, you got money, nigga? If not, then fuck off. And Laos, what he proceeds to do after proves he's a much better man than me. Because if you told me and my half-dead friend who's literally laying out on the floor right next to you, you can hear her gasping for air, fighting for her fucking life. If you told me and her to fuck off, I'm gonna let you come across that little Undi thing as a surprise, right? But Laos, he doesn't do this, and he warns them about, like, you know, what's to come. But the gnome little arrogant fucker, he's like, man, we got this shit, right? He's like, I'm a gnome, I'm cool with spirits or whatever. And he's like, I'm not even worried about that shit. Which he should have been, because this thing tries to shoot him immediately. But he's a quick little thinker and uses Namari as a sacrifice, and she tanks that headshot for him. This is when the gnome dude and his group do a quick little about face. This is the first time we actually get to see a resurrection happen. Because, well, Namari's kind of dead right now, and he has to bring her back. And since she is not okay with this sight at all, he's just like, you know, this resurrection shit, it's not normal. And the gnome dude, he hears Sinchi talking to the group about this, and he's like, yeah, you're right, it's not normal. But look around you, nigga, we are in a fucking dungeon. None of this shit is normal. And speaking of shit not being normal, that's actually the reason why I'm here. Because the gnome dude, apparently he's just here to investigate some, and so he asks Laos if he can help him out with said investigation, because obviously the new help he hired is not gonna cut it. And in return, he'll help Laos out by healing Marcel. So they go to investigate the area they need to. And as they're moving forward, this is when Laos's sword friend gives them a little notification that there's something nearby. And so Laos tells the group to hold up. And the gnome dude, he's like, man, nigga, handle that shit. What the fuck did I hire you for? And Laos is like, bro, straight up, I may be crazy, but I'm not a fucking idiot. I'm not gonna go down there and attack something I don't even know what the fuck it is. So the gnome dude, being impatient as all hell, he sends one of his black goons down to handle the situation, right? And immediately they get snatched up by this like tentacle monster thing. So hey, at least now they know what they're dealing with. To breeze past this little altercation for the sake of the video. Pretty much Laos uses Shinji's helmet to get up there in them tentacles, right? Free them both up. Because apparently Namari is just like a master at using weapons or whatever. And since Laos helped him out, despite having to be turned around from the damage from the tentacle monster thing, the gnome dude still agrees to heal Marcel, right? And a piece of the tentacle thing that they were just fighting got stuck to Shinji's hand, so just take a guess what they did with it. So after that little break, Marcel notices that she's out of mana. And you know, as the mage of the group, you can't really do anything without mana. You just want to fucking flail that stick around or some shit, right? Nah, she's not gonna do that. So Laos is like, man, you should head back to the surface, man, and recover yourself. Like, we can handle this. But Marcel is really in this to win this shit. She wants to save her girl Fallen. She comes up with this idea to drink the water from the Lindy thing that's holding them back, you know, keeping them trapped and stopping them from advancing further down. So yeah, she wants to drink that thing in order to hopefully recover her mana from that, because it's just what it is. It's literally just a mass of mana. Actually, they come up with a plan to actually subdue this thing. And you're gonna use Shinji's pot, which turns out to be this like legendary material that's used for like blacksmithing that the dwarves have access to, right? And he turned it into a pot because, well, he could better utilize this thing for his cooking. But regardless, they're gonna use both sides of the pot to kind of like, you know, trap it. From there, they'll move it over to a fire to boil this thing up like some crawfish. So Shinji and Laos get into action and they step up to, you know, go to work. So Shinji's able to do his end of the deal and, you know, like hold his own against the indie thing, but Laos being a regular ass nigga and not a dwarf, he's not able to withstand the blast from the Undi shooting water at them. And so Namari notices this happening, and she still does care about her old group. The reason she really left was it's because she's broke, right? She just broke as shit. But regardless, now with two dwarfs in the mix of things, they're eventually able to subdue this thing and bring it up to the fire in order to kill it. And of course, almost inevitably, they make some food out of the water from this Undi thing and turn it into like some sort of stew that the group ends up eating together and bonding over. And you know, after that little bit of bonding, we find out through Namari that the other member of the group that left was apparently in love with Fallen, right? So more than likely he's searching for her on his own through his own methods. But the original four move on from that point, and then they come across this shortcut that the orcs gave them on the map, and they, you know, they use the shortcut, but apparently it's covered in all these like stinging vine things. To pretty much make this short, they end up wearing the skin of their enemies that were like these frog things, right? In order to pass through these like stinging vine tentacle things without actually getting like stung by them. So they do that and eventually make it to the 5th floor where the dragon was previously spotted by these orcs. And they come across this pile of like burned corpses. So yeah, them come across this scene right here kind of forces Marcel to, you know, get real with herself and consider like, are we even strong enough to take this thing down? Like fucking kinda got ate, right? She kinda got ate. So what if she's already digested by this thing? But regardless, they're there already. So they start to devise this plan to actually take this thing down with just them. So they plan to lure the dragon around the area using Shinji's pot to protect it, or to protect them from the dragon's flame breath and whatnot, because it's a legendary material or whatever the fuck. And eventually they want to lure it to this area to where they can, you know, drop a building straight on its dome, right? And from there they can do what they need to do. But the whole time, you know, the other three were discussing the plan to take this dragon down. Shinji, he was actually just chefing it up in order to make sure they're actually nourished this time, because remember, the start of like part of the reason of the start of this anime was because they were malnourished and they weren't able to fight the red dragon to their full effect, right? But you know, as they're eating, it's time for them to encounter this thing that they've been chasing down this entire time. The red dragon. So with that, the group now all gets in their positions to, you know, take this thing down. And we start this episode out with Marcel wondering like, is this gonna be enough to even take this thing down? But our girl ain't no hoe, so she eventually finds her resolve and gets, serious about it. But now it's time for the motherfucking action, right? And it starts with Laos drawing this dragon around through some alleyways so it can use up its fire breath. So it has like less fuel to use later when shit might get, dire. And he's actually like pretty successful in doing this, like out like luring it through the alleyways and whatnot. But Laos wasn't fully thinking about the dragon's capabilities, so he like blocks, one of the breaths from the pot. But he wasn't thinking about the heat transfer aspect of, fire and metal and pots and shit, right? So as he's like holding back the breath of the dragon, he burns his hand and drops the fucking pot. So now they're forced to bring the dragon to Marcel's direction a lot sooner than anticipated, and she successfully drops the part of the building onto its head, right? Laying the dragon out flat. But that shit did not work. So after a little bit of scrambling for their lives, Laos and Chillik are in like the ultimate clutch position to take this dragon out. They're underneath its mouth, and then they can, just reach up and strike, its soft spot to kill it, right? But you remember Laos's sword and how it's more than just a sword, right? Yeah, that lame ass nigga pussied out. The sword fucking pussied out and got the fuck up out of there. So yeah, now the group is stuck underneath the dragon, and Marcel's trying to help out with her magic, but she can only do so much against the fucking dragon. And this is the moment when Senshi reveals that the knife that he uses is apparently made out of like an even more legendary material than his pot is made out of. But the reason he didn't mention it is because Namaari probably would have killed him for it. And this knife thing is really legendary because it can truly like, cut through anything. And it does it to the dragon, but well, shit. So now the dragon is properly pissed off at the group. So they realize they gotta do something like now, or they're all gonna die. So Senshi, he runs out from underneath the dragon to try to, draw its attention, but it kind of gets stomped on in the process. I don't know how he just tanked that shit, but he does. But Chillik actually comes in clutch right here, and he comes in to try and, help Senshi out of this situation. But the most he can do is like get that knife out of the dragon's foot or whatever and throw it at its eye in order to blind it, thus giving Laos a chance to regroup with Marcel and then, attack it for the second time. But, as Chillik was doing all this, he got kind of knocked out in this process, so now it's just Marcel and Laos to handle this situation. And upon regrouping with each other, Laos comes up with the idea to use the pot that he has, right? And Marcel to, do a fire spell underneath the pot in order to launch himself up to get on top of the dragon's head in order to access its weak spot. And that's a crazy ass nigga plan. I don't gotta explain, that's just a crazy ass nigga plan, right? So he does this and enacts the plan, and it works. He's actually able to get on top of the dragon's head, but the thing is, he's just a little bit too high. It worked a little bit too well to the point where he can't, physically access, the dragon's soft spot, but get the angle he needs to actually stab the dragon successfully. On some G shit, right? He sacrifices his leg to like give himself the proper angle in order to access the underneath of its mouth. But in this process, he ends up getting his leg kind of chopped off, but he was successful in taking this dragon out. So after that, kind of unsurprisingly, Laos passes out from, the shock of getting his leg bit off, right? And he goes through this like flashback with him and Fallon from when they were much younger, right? And he was investigating the ghost site, and pretty much he gets possessed by the ghost in said ghost site. But Fallon was there to, help him get unpossessed. But pretty much like the purpose of this backstory is Laos remembering like how his little sister used to care for him when he was younger, and he just, he pretty much misses that. And that's part of the reason why he's just going so hard to save his sister. But Laos is back awake after Marcel uses her recovery magic on him and reattaches his leg. And she does the same recovery magic to the other two, right? But these guys waste, no time doing what they came here for, to save his sister. So they start to like dissect the dragon to get to its stomach, and they eventually find it and open it, right? But they begin to search through the stomach and find nothing inside of it, which kind of shifts the tone to a somber mood of the group. And then this is when Laos and his crazy ass gets the idea to look through the dragon's appendix for its like indigestible parts, and so they do that, right? And they eventually come across Fallon's skull and staff after searching through this like massive bones. But in order to revive Fallen from the state she's in, they can't use normal resurrection methods like that were used with Namari and when she got shot in the head. They instead have to use like some sort of black magic, which Marcel knows a little bit about from her research. But in order to do this, they have to sort out her bones from like all the different monster part bones that were inside its appendix. And sadly, not surprisingly, Laos is having a blast sorting through his dead sister's bones. But eventually they get all the parts sorted out, and you know, like as a source of energy and calories, they choose to use, you know, the red dragon's meat as the energy they need for the resurrection. And surprisingly, this resurrection actually does work, and Fallen comes back to life, and she's just, you know, a little bit loopy and shit, considering the fact that she was just previously dead. And they get right to preparing a meal for her. And then from there, they transition to a bath scene, which I'm not gonna show you, horny fucks. The gooning has to stop. But regardless, pretty much all that's covered in this bath scene is the fact that Fallen feels like she's, you know, beaming with magic, which I'm assuming is coming from, you know, using the red dragon as a source of energy. But the group realizes with Senshi's aptitude for cooking, he's most likely gonna want to do it near the dragon. And now this is a little bit of an issue, because I don't know if you remember the fact of the dragons and, you know, that fire aspect they got going on. In order to have this fire aspect going on, the dragon has to be flammable. And, you know, cooking near something that's flammable isn't really the best idea. I don't really gotta explain that one, right? So the group immediately goes out to stop Senshi from doing whatever the fuck he got planned, but they're not quick enough. And so Senshi, you know, he lights this fire, damn near blows that bitch up. Not damn near, he does blow this bitch up, but luckily, thank God, Fallen with her newfound powers and whatnot, she's able to cast a spell that's powerful enough to protect them from this big ass explosion. So with that, these niggas ain't gonna waste shit. So they start to cook next to this open flame within the dragon, right? And they make a whole feast to celebrate, you know, Fallen's resurrection. And this is when I found out the weirdo freakiness must run in the family or some shit, because Fallen she's just as enthusiastic as Laos when it comes to eating these monsters, right? I mean, we do gotta consider the fact that she's practically cannibalizing herself right now, and is totally okay with that. Like, no skin off her bone. Well, yeah, cut that last part. But regardless, apart from that, we get some scene with Marcel and Laos just telling Fallen how much they truly care for her. Then out of nowhere, right, we see a scene of that elf dude that Laos encountered from those painting scenes, and he's just looking pissed as hell at the now deceased red dragon. And then something from there causes Fallen to get up in the middle of the night and jump out a window, and then start heading towards the scene of the now dead red dragon. And then this is when the elf dude starts talking to Fallen and starts asking her why she strayed from her task that was supposed to be looking for the king. And so Laos gets a weird feeling in the middle of the night and gets up to go check on Fallen and notices that she's missing, and eventually comes across the scene of the red dragon, and it's just now a dissolved mess. And from there he sees Fallen now screaming in what it looks like to be pain, and also saying that she has to find Lord Dale like he's her old crack plug or something. And then the elf dude recognizes Laos from, you know, the encounters that he had with him inside the paintings. And then this is the moment when Laos recognizes the elf guy to be the lunatic magician, you know, the ruler of this dungeon. But Laos focuses on his sister, but she just fucks around and swats him away like he's a fucking fly. The elf nigga recognizes Laos to be a threat, and from there he pulls out his own grimoire and starts like summoning these like blood dragon things from the blood of the red dragon. But thankfully Marcel was there, and she's able to like cancel out these spells from the lunatic magician using her own dark magic. And you know, as she's fighting, this is when Marcel asks the lunatic magician, like, are you the creator of the dungeon? And instead of answering her anything, he just sends the entire group through the fucking floor. And he goes up to Fallen and says the current form she's in must be inconvenient to you. And so he starts to convert her into something else entirely. But when the lunatic magician sent the group through the floor, he sent them to this room that, you know, it's like, it's closing in on them. And just as Marcel's about to accept her fate of being suffocated to death, she gets pulled through she gets pulled through the wall by this like ghost thing, and the rest of the group follows behind them, and now they're surrounded by what appears to be a group of harmless ghosts. But when the ghosts end up leaving, they end up coming across another separate group of orcs that spare them yet again due to, you know, Senshi's relationship with the orcs. To express their gratitude, they help Laos and Marcel out with this yummy looking concoction that they made. So as the other two are resting up, Chilik brings up the lunatic magician to the orc lady, and then this is when he realizes what the fuck they're dealing with. And so Chilik's like, I'm not trying to die or see anyone else die. So he wants to lie to the group in order to somehow convince them to go back up to the surface. So he asked the orc lady to, show him where their stuff was. She's a little hesitant too because, the bitch behavior Chilik was just showing, but she eventually does because, since she insists. And so, as they're walking over to retrieve their old items, Chilik gets to talking to the orc lady, and then this is when we get to, get a little bit more insight into Chilik's mind. He doesn't really understand why the group is like pushing themselves so hard when it's more than likely gonna end up with one of them getting hurt, or, even worse. And on top of that, he feels personally responsible for Laos going so hard just by the sheer fact that he's there along with him, right? Thus making Laos feel like he can't really, turn back because there's other people with him. He just has to keep pressing forward. And Chilik is trying to shy away from that responsibility. But then, through dialogue, this is when the orc lady helps Chilik realize that he just simply doesn't want to see his friends die, right? And as he's returning back to the group, this is when he, comes across the scene of where the red dragon should be, at least. But instead, he just sees like a pool of blood and what appears to be some drag marks through that blood. But through that dialogue with the orc lady, Chilik now realizes that he has to be honest with Laos and let him know, like, the way we're moving right now, nigga, one of us are bound to die. So let's please just head back to the surface to regroup, right? And that's what Laos does. He listens. And that's what they decide to do. Alright, now we are officially at the second half mark of the season. And the next episode starts off with, well, hello there, YouTube. Sorry to cut you off, but I gotta cut you off. This video is almost an hour long already, right? And I gotta upload something, So yeah, sorry for that, but I gotta, stop it right here. And if you guys wanna see the second half of the season and subsequently part 2, subscribe to my channel. Cause I'm gonna upload this next part to the video actually in like the next few days. But yeah, here's just a little bit of insight into what's happening right now. Yeah, I gotta cut this shit in half because I'm only halfway done with like editing, the audio that you guys hear of me talking. I still gotta go through and add about a good 30 minutes of just straight B-roll, So yeah, this is why this video is getting cut into 2 different parts. So yeah, subscribe and I will have that next part uploaded in less than 5 days. Well, let me be realistic, in less than 7 days at least, at the very least. But yeah, other than that, if you enjoyed this video and just enjoyed me talking for a fucking hour, first off, thank you for staying until this point. But secondly, I do have other videos like this on my channel. Just check out my most recent uploads. I have a few videos of me telling stories and also videos of me just talking about like reality shows and other anime. And also like, it's a brain fart. All right, I'm gonna stop the video right here.